Hello and welcome to this presentation of my case study for a responsive mobile app that I have designed end-to-end as part of my UX course with Career Foundry. Xpart is the name of my app, and it aims to connect amateur and up-and-coming artists with a professional or expert in their particular artistic field. Xpart will allow its users to arrange video calls with an artist to seek out their expertise. It will feature a community forum and gallery where other users can share their experience and showcase their work, as well as all the information you need on events and art shows in the user's local area. To begin this journey, I wanted to define a problem and come up with a hypothesis to solve it. The reason why I chose this particular project is because of the first-hand experience I have in it. Myself, I'm an amateur painter in both acrylic and oil paints, and I've often become a little stuck in my work, or there are certain techniques I want to master, but I don't have access to a mentor, and I don't want to go back to school. The artwork in general tends to be a little bit of a closed shop. It's hard to get in, to have your work shown, and it's oftentimes unnecessarily aloof. I want to break down these barriers and have as many amateur artists as possible improve their skill by offering expert advice at the touch of a button. This project took me a total of 4 months, and I took on all the roles within the project itself. Along my design journey, I followed these 5 stages in a very much a non-linear fashion. Designing, then testing, testing, then designing, and so on. Much more of a circular approach to the problem. The first step along the design process was to understand what was already out there and what I would be competing against. It turned out there was little to no competition in this specific market. Sure, lots of artists had their own websites where they were offering classes, and there are a plethora of YouTube videos, but there isn't yet an app that amalgamates art experts all in one place. Therefore, there is plenty of opportunity and potential in my app. I decided to focus my attention on analyzing apps that have a similar angle to mine, that being asking an expert for advice. I honed in on an app called Expert Republic that offers paid expert advice in a variety of categories. I conducted a SWOT analysis and came away with a few key takeaways that I could offer in my app that weren't present in Expert Republic. I would need to create a clear, consistent, and easily navigable app that doesn't overwhelm potential users. I would want to have a vetting process to make sure that the experts on my app are actually experts that can offer authentic and worthwhile advice. And finally, I would need to offer a thorough review system where users can find as much information about the expert as possible before deciding to make a call. Human-centered design is at the forefront of my design thinking, and so next I conducted both user surveys and user interviews to explore all of the W's, the who, why, where, when, and what of the potential makeup of my app. I wanted to discover and understand what potential users would be looking for in an app like mine, and keep my focus on this for the rest of the project. I wanted to determine if users would be willing to seek out expert artistic advice, as I couldn't find competition already out there. I wanted to discover what features users would find useful on an Ask the Expert app, and to better understand user behavior whilst they were creating their own artwork, and whether, if any, they used any digital help with their artwork. Here you can see the key findings of my interviews, and it's funny, the word authentic kept popping up over and over again with my interviewees. Users seemed to be fed up with image or art apps where the content creators had nothing of substance to say. They wanted the opposite from XPart. They wanted to build real relationships with genuine, professional artists. I then created 3 user personas to reflect the behaviors, needs, and goals of my target audience, and to reduce my own bias throughout the design process. Keeping the end user in mind is imperative for a UX designer. I followed this up with some potential user journeys and user flows that would hone in on issues that were raised by participants during the interviews in the discovery stage. What users needed were to be able to call an expert. They needed to post their own work and have it reviewed and critiqued. And users wanted to be able to find and connect with like-minded artists, either arranging to meet them in real life or via the community forum feature. After gathering all of this data, it was now time to create a sitemap and lay out the information architecture of the app. This part of the process produced its first hurdle in my path on my design journey. Through this card sorting exercise, I realized that my initial plans for the app seemed to be confusing the users. Of course, usability is key, whereas my initial designs were adding to the user's cognitive load. The results of my card sorting exercise birthed a brand new 3 to 4 screen onboarding process as to familiarize the user with how the app works and reduce potential confusion. With my data-driven sitemap and user personas in mind, I then designed low, mid, and high-fidelity wireframes to discover solutions to my app's usability, functionality, and aesthetics. The low and mid-fidelity wireframes, as you can see, were designed in grayscale to keep the focus on refining the functionality and building clearer navigation. I focused on iterations of the onboarding process, which you can see here, as well as the searching for an expert feature and booking a call, as well as reading and leaving reviews about an expert. As many of my interviewees were really looking for authenticity in an artist, then finding and reading reviews will be a key feature on this app. Once the wireframes had been created, it was now time to test them on potential users. I conducted 6 tests overall, 4 remote moderated tests and 2 in-person moderated tests. These tests gave me great insight into which direction my app was heading. I gathered the data and created an affinity map, as well as a rainbow spreadsheet to clearly identify any common errors that were present in my prototype, before applying them to a severity scale to prioritize problems and begin modifying the design. Here you can see some of the key findings from the tests and what I was going to do to rectify the problems. Participants had real trouble advancing from the splash screen. The highlights box on the dashboard should be bigger, clearer, and with icons. And the misleading and confusing questions in the onboarding needed addressing. You can see now how my design has changed throughout the course of its iterations. This first initial screen here of the splash screen had no call to actions buttons, and users were getting confused and couldn't leave the page. I added the CTA buttons, but then it became too decorative, and I wanted to move away from these still photographs and create some sort of brand logo. So here you can see on the high fidelity version the blue brushstrokes that act like a paint splash with clearly identifiable CTA buttons. The final stage of the design process, I created an overall design language for the app that it meant it could be handed over to a developer and they could easily follow along to how the design should look and feel, with all specifications for elements within the app. Here you can see just a few highlights of that, some of the colors, the typography that was used, some of the UI elements including buttons and cards, as well as how the app should use its interactions and its overall language and tone. Here is the current iteration of my prototype. And finally, what I've learned from this whole process. My key findings were that iteration never stops. As I mentioned earlier, the UX design process is not linear. It's a case of continuous reflection, design, testing, discovering, design, testing, and so on and so on. I found that feedback is absolutely essential in the design process. Just having that extra pair of eyes on your work throughout the project was crucial, as they can see things that the designer can't, as they are often so engulfed by their own work. And finally, working solo on projects has both its pros and its cons. Playing design god on all your decisions does have advantages. Decisions are often made quicker and more decisively. Of course, there's that real strong bond and connection to your work, as it's all of your own. And all the aesthetics of the app are the vision of the designer, rather than important decisions being dictated to you by the project's constraints. But personally, for me, I'm a team player, and I would want to collaborate on as many projects as possible going forward. The camaraderie of working with others, the chance to bounce ideas off each other, and the pleasure of creating things together. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.